Hi guys, so it's time for the new zoo video. I have many important updates in this video and things you just have to hear if you're playing this deck. So first of all, some things changed in the deck, in the main and in the sideboard. First, we'll go through the lands. We switched the two charms. Fetch and other lands are basically the same or very similar, but we changed the triumphs. We changed the triumphs because in this version I'm playing three Dromoka's command. I'll talk about them later. Okay, so the Savai triumph and Zago triumph make you prioritize different lands than you do in a previous mana version with Xander's Lounge and in Data Triumph. Okay, so in this version, you're prioritizing different shocks. So prioritizing the Sacred Foundry, Breeding Pool, because they're a pair with your triumphs. Okay, so we are playing Dromoka Commands main, and mana colors on Dromoka are green and white, and these triumphs and these lands enable us to cast Dromoka on a turn 2, and it's much easier to have Dromoka functioning well in a deck in a that way. Okay, so it's not. I didn't change the mana base just because the Dromoka, but after changing the mana base, I decided to go with 3 Dromoka in the, let's say, flex spots. But we'll talk about Dromoka a bit later. So I changed the mana base for different reasons to make Winsub Heat, which is like the most favorable, the most wanted fetch in the deck because it fetches both of your basic. I wanted to make the Heat fetch both of our triumphs, and these are with Alexander and in data, Savai and Zago Triumph are traditionally best triumph pair for domain mana base. Okay, so for the fetches, in my opinion, this mana base is the best, and I really like to encourage you to play this mana base for this version of a deck. If you're playing some other version. Uh, with some other cards like I don't know, maybe expressive iteration or something like it, you didn't need to change it. But if you're playing my previous version or this version, I would definitely recommend the new mana base. Xander's Lounge and in data is pretty similar, but it's also pretty good. But the Savai Zago Triumph makes Dromoka casting much easier because Steam Vents is a problem. If you're Xander Lounge and Steam Vents on first two turns, make casting Dromoka harder or impossible. So we did the switch, and we did. Here are the fetches. So the fetches are 4 Foothills, which is the best fetch for any domain deck. It fetches all lands in our deck except the basic planes. Okay, so the second most wanted fetch in this version is Windsor Heat. You can play if you want 4 Heat and 4 Strength instead of 1 Arid Mesa and 1 Misty Rainforest, but Misty and Arid Mesa are here instead of 4 copy of Strength and Heat to make math on fetching the shocks just slightly better for a small percentage. Okay, so but if you want, you can play 4 heat and 4 strength instead of these two fetches. Okay, these are the shocks and basics. You need to play these two basics. You can, if you're cutting a land and you're certain that you're in your meta game people don't play Blood Moon, you can just cut maybe one forest and or something like that, or for another fetch or for another shock. But just please don't play Stomping Ground in your deck because it's really not necessary. As I said, this, in my opinion, is the best mana base, and you should be you should be this, or you can check my previous mana base with Xander Lounge and Data. Those two versions are, in my opinion, best mana bases, and I'm talking this stuff because I saw a lot of players playing worse mana bases and losing a lot of games just because they're playing Stomping Ground with their deck, or they're playing like stuff like Boseiju with the same, just instead of forest or something like that, with the same number of lands. It's not good. And also, if you're playing this version, don't play Blood Crypt, play Overgrown Tomb. It's really important, in my opinion, to do it in this version, and that's it. So it's easier to fetch. It makes your fetches better. You don't want to play arid mesas at all, uh, but you can play one of arid mesa and one of misty rainforest to make overall fetching of your shocks just slightly better for a small percentage. But as I said, you can play just 4 Flooded Strand, 4 Winsep Heat, and 4 Wooded Foothills. Okay, that's it. We are done with the fetches. So the main board change for this version is 3 Dromoka's command main. We made a mana base which allows us to cast Dromoka's command much easier, and we are ready for some Dromoka's command blowouts. So with the 3 Dromoka's main, you will now experience just how good the card actually is. So it's great against the Hammer Time. It kills their enchantment. What is it called? Um, the enchantment that equips the hammer. I forgot the name. So it kills Urza Saga. Let's say your opponent is playing Urza Saga deck. They play a fetch as their third land, and they try to fetch it. And response, you just play Dromoka command, fight your creature with their creature, and destroy. Make them sack the saga before they can make a token. It's an incredible blowout. So you can use it like turn 1 a Cuttle, turn 2 make them sack the Fable and fight with the Fable token. You can kill Dress Down when your Nishoba Brawlers are on the field. You can save Territorial Cow from the Dress Down by putting counter on Territorial Cow. You can counter Unholy Heat, which is the most common removal that kills your Sign of Jacob and your Territorial Cows. You can counter the Lightning Bolt. You can counter Tribal Flames from the Zoo Mirror. You can counter. It's a main deck hate for burn matchup, which is pretty a common matchup in paper, especially, but also on online. So the card has been maybe the most important thing. Um, it destroys the leyline binding. Everyone is playing the leyline binding. I think the playability of the card will just rise through for this period. Everybody's trying to jam the binding in their deck, and this card is for 2 mana, destroying the leyline binding and doing one other thing like countering heat, like putting counter on your creature, like making them. Fighting your creature with their creature, a whole lot of stuff. So the most played cards in the good decks right now are like Binding, Rhinos play it, the in Creativity play it, Escape Shift play it, Omnat play it. Everyone is trying to jam it, and Fable 2. So it's a great counter to those cards. It's a great counter to Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt, and just makes your Nishoba Brawler better against Bolt. You can turn it into 6/4, or counter the Heat, or counter Heat. Fight with other creature. It's a really incredible card currently. I think the flex slots for this deck are now figured out. You can Remand. I think Remand is still cool. So you can still play Remand in the main. It said it many times. It's good against Yagmoth. It's good against Amulet if they don't have the Cavern, and in most times they don't. So it's very good in that matchup. It's good in Creativity against Cape Shift, against all the decks that play, all the mid-range decks that play 3 mana and the 4 mana spells. It can be really effective and steal your opponent turn and draw a card for just 2 mana. From the previous version, the Fairies main is also cool if your meta is like Cascade decks, control matchups, Teferi is very cool. It's also good against Murktide, so it deals with a lot of the meta game, a lot of cards, and okay, so that's it. We removed one Dromoka from the sideboard previously, and a third graveyard hate piece on the sideboard to add two Furies to the sideboard. So we are still playing Giganta. I wanted to do this to show you that you can play Fury in your sideboard and still have Giganta in your sideboard. You're taking Fury in just 5 or 6 specific matchups. It's good against also it's good against Yagmoth. It's good against Hammer Time, Affinity, that kind of decks you're having problem with, and it's good against most of the decks where Hiritsugu is good. But instead of playing more Hiritsugu, we are playing another different way to attack those decks because you can actually use it in some other decks too, where you have like. Cards that are bad, and Fury is better than those few. So okay, the rest of the sideboard is the same, exactly the same as is in 2 or 3 previous videos, and that's it. I think this version for current metagame on the MTGO is perfect for all of you guys playing online, but also in paper. Um, it, paper metagame also follows the MTGO, but with bit of delay. So I expect this deck to be really good in any random metagame. Uh, because it has all the tools to fight all kinds of different decks. So you can just remember when you're playing in your local meta game, try to adjust your sideboard or main board to decks you're playing against, like using stuff from my previous videos, like Squee in main, like Teferi in main, like Remand in main, and maybe some your own ideas, something like that. Okay, but I would also I like to for you to use this exact mana base. Don't play Stomping Ground in your deck. You don't need it. It complicates getting domain every time you draw it in your first hand. It's worse than basics. It's worse than any other shock in a deck, and it's worse than any fetch. Okay, so that's it. It's time to start some gameplay. So I have incredible score with this version of a deck once again. So um I'm currently on. I did the 10-2. I had the 10-2 score today, and the last time I played the deck was when I made the last video around 10 days ago. When I also did a 9. I did 9-1 that day, and I'm not just playing the zoo whole day. I'm playing trying to brew some other decks, playing some other worse or better decks, but every 10 days I take zoo and play 2, 3, 4 leagues with it, just to try to keep it up to the date, and that's it. So we'll now watch some games. Okay, this was the last league, and we will start with the league before that. I think Manilone's game was game 1 from that league. Okay, we'll start it. And in the meantime, I did 1-1. Okay, so Manilone's matchup. Manilone, he's always playing the same decks, so um, he's on the 4-color Rhinos or 5-color Rhinos, whatever, and for some last time. And he started very well with the Sign of Draco, turn 2, and I went for Kill Scion, attack with Dragaman, of course, and then played my Triumph, played holded the Lightning Bolt for their block from Ragavan, and I went for Bolt on Rhino, and they decided to use the Force of Negation, which was like a fine trade because they had to use two cards, but unfortunately they had a perfect hand on their turn. They had Binding plus Scion, which was unwinnable for me, and they also had the Borrower, so it was pretty brutal hand from Maninone game one. Okay, so game two was time for a revenge, definitely. Much easier playing first, keeping decent hand with Ragawana, Hiritsugu, and some removals. Not the best, but not the worst. I think it's decent. They went for Gemstone Caverns, turn one, Ditch the Fury, killed my Ragavan, so it didn't start perfect for me, but my opponent was a bit slower at this time, so I was able to untap turn 3, draw into Stubborn Denial, and hold Hiritsugu in hand, which is obviously a good. So they went for binding, and I decided to prioritize killing the binding, killing my opponent instead of countering the tokens because I had Hiritsugu in hand. I was planning just to play my Hiritsugu, kill their tokens, and whole lane binding in meantime for next turn. Uh, okay, so they went. Menino decided to go shardless back to their hand, and but decided against playing it next turn. So I just went. He wanted to trade with a flyer because I had a Scion, very good clock with Scion, and he didn't have answer for Scion because he decided to bounce his own Shardless Agent, which proved to be a bad decision for him at that game. But we were now ready for game three. Okay, so game three, I gotta say it's difficult to play against this deck. Game 3, especially when you're starting with fetch and planes, and you have and you draw into Scion, you definitely want to. I decided to go for Zagotrion. Luckily played my fetch, which was very good for me at this point. I just decided to play my fetch, hold my fetch, hold for Stubborn Denial. I didn't want to crack it right now because then they're able to just and play their Rhinos. So, but at this position, I was in a pretty good spot actually because I had this two Stubborn Denials, had a Hiritsugu in hand. I was able to fetch perfectly into two blue sources and a domain. So it was pretty good for me. My opponent had a slower hand, they had like a controlish hand without Rhinos early, and so he just proceeds the turn with suspending the footfalls, and I decided against attacking with Nakatel. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I had the stubborn denial. Yeah, whatever. Okay, I had the denial, so I did attack. They didn't have 4 mana to play Counterspell plus the Rhinos, so I was pretty safe. And with his stubborn denial, Hiritsugu in hand, chances for Manino coming back to this game were pretty low, but he had Fury, which was very good at this point. But I had everything I need. I had the binding to go for 3 damage and finishing off with the tribal flames, and that was the game one. Okay, so game two was my only loss in these two leagues. I played whole, so we'll first go with wins and then do the losses later. Only loss was against Hammer Time in this league, and I played against Hammer Time in the trophy game on the last league where I won the matchup. So I kind of got my revenge too there. And this matchup was again Gemstone Caverns Rhinos. So in these two leagues, I played two times against Rhinos, four color Rhinos. Oh, sorry, don't think this was four color. I think this was Temur. Yeah, this was Temur Rhinos. They played Blood Moon. Okay, so I'm not sure, but I think so. Um, they played first, so uh, it was a bit harder for me to play against them. But I had good hand with Kavu, Scion, and Leyline Binding, and Kavu just having first strike there was very good. My opponent succeeded to bounce it, but I played in Shoba Brawler before that and binding the other Rhino. So again, my opponent went for Fury, which is one of the best plays for them in this position, and I was just able to play my cow and make it 6-6 and kill their Fury. So they just played another Fury, which at this point trades with cow and makes me unable uh, to attack. So we are both low on cards at this point in the top deck mode, but I have top deck into Scion of Draco and making me able to go attack with the cow, just loot a land out of my hand, draw another one, drew into Dromoka, which was great because it counters the Leyline Binding at this point, which seems very important. It also makes mine a Cuttle 4/4, able to attack into the Rhinos, and I just killed their Fury, make mine a Cuttle 4/4, which was a great play. At this point, I will hide the chat so we have a bigger screen. Okay. My opponent knew about my deck, so we chatted a bit. Okay. Game 2. My opponent beat me. I had unfortunate mulligan to 4 cards, but I still did decent. I still did decent job against them. I was even close to winning. He went for suspend crushing footfalls. I had the fairy in hand, so it seemed fine. But that play will win the game in the end. Okay, so I went for my triumph, of course. I didn't care if they played Fire Ice or something. I just wanted to be able to cast my Teferi turn 3. But anyway, I just cast my Scion turn 2, and you can see it's definitely not true that this deck doesn't mulligan well. You just have to know to mulligan well here. And this is where I did a mistake. Mistake was made, definitely. I should have just attacked with Ragavan here. And there's Ragavan, create the treasure token, and then I would be able to go Dromoka's next turn and probably win the game. But I didn't do it. I holded the Dromoka in case they play the Rhinos, so I can just destroy the Leyline Binding. But they didn't play Rhinos, so I was in a pretty bad position. They were too because they didn't have the basic. At this point, I had the Ragavan, so it wasn't definitely over for me. And I succeeded. I attacked with Ragavan this time and found actually Force of Vigor, which would have been great. At this point, I wasn't able to cast it. I went for Dromoka, and after them countering the Dromoka, that was a game over for me. My only chance was the Scion from the top. They even had removal for Ragavan, so they were able to attack with the both Rhinos, and that was it. They had also had a basic in hand, which helped them. Okay, so Game three, I decided to go for the hand with the five lands because I had the cow in hand, and it's difficult for them to, impossible really to kill a cow. They can just bounce it. So instead of cow, I played the Shardless Agent from my opponent's deck. Um, it was decent play against the Rhinos. It brought me the creature I need to block their Rhinos in case they play it, but they didn't even play it. They just went for Leyland Binding. It was great for me. In my upkeep, it was great for me because um, I was able to attack without worrying if they will just create rhinos for blocking, and I exiled the Shardless Agent from my opponent's top again. And when I tried to cast it, they conceded. That was it. Okay, so sorry, was that? Yeah, that was game three, second game against Rhinos. So we'll now go to next match. Okay, so I'm playing second, keeping decent hand. This was yeah the Yeskai Breach hand, the Yeskai Breach deck, very good deck in my opinion. Currently, and very tricky to play against. You have to know. All the ways they can kill you to play to be able to play good against them. So unfortunately, I made a mistake there. It wasn't very important, but I accidentally played Arid Mesa. At this point, I just clicked accidentally on the fetch, and I didn't realize I already have a Foundry on the field, and Arid Mesa can't find me. The Breeding Pool, should have just played the Flooded Strand and to make a territorial Kavu 4-4 this turn, but it didn't really matter. They were planning on using the other Spellbomb anyway. They did it before the combat, so I had the tomb in hand. I wanted the blue source and the second red source at this point, so I just went for Steam Vents. I played my cow as a 4-4, make it out of the Bolt Reach. I'm not sure even if they played the Bolt, but I just played both of my creatures, and they didn't have the Breach this turn or anything, so they conceded. So playing on the draw against breach can definitely be tricky. I decided to keep the. I also had to mulligan on 5, so I had the Ragavan turn 1, cow turn 2. It's decent. It's a decent hand, and as you already saw, this deck can really uh, beat other decks with just with a 5 cards hand without a lot of problems. So my opponent also had a decent hand here, but I'm convinced I would win if I had better hand with more cards. And I stabilized pretty decent at this position. Had a binding, had a flames, and my opponent just played the fable. Uh, They played a lot of stuff here, and they found the expressive iteration, the fable, and it was problematic for me because I had to definitely kill the Emery, and it really didn't matter at this point. I just wanted to make them unable to generate mana with Mox in case they go the grounding station breach, which they did. But they had both the grinding station and the breach in their hand, which meant they can just play the Mishra's Bubble many times until they find um, a second Moxember, and they did find it, and they had a good number of cards in their graveyards to be able to cast everything. And they cast the Tusk Oracle, so playing first with a good hand is obviously makes playing against them much easier. I had a lot of interaction here. Dromokas to kill the Saga, Stubborn Denial, Binding, Hiretsugu to kill their cheap stuff, cheap artifacts and creatures. Okay, so I decided against countering the grinding station. They can, if they have the breach, they can just replay it from their graveyard. So it's not the greatest play to counter the grinding station. Okay, so I drew into my first threat, the Nishoba Broa. I played it, of course, with the backup Stubborn Denial in hand, which was great. Made me available of casting the of start to attacking, and I was in a great position. So you can here just see how good the Dromoka's command is. So my opponent is cracking the fetch in response. I have a creature on the field, I have target for Dromoka's command, my opponent has the enchantment on the field. So I play the Dromoka, make my Nishoba Brawl 6/4, take it out of the bolt range if they play it, and make them sack Urza Saga. They can't create the token because they currently don't have the mana for it. My opponent has interaction, they had the Gust, but I had the Stubborn Denial in hand, and it was like total blowout. It completely ruined everything they were trying to do for the first 3 turns. And they just went for turn 3 Fable, which was kind of good for me because I had exactly what I needed in hand. Um, binding for their uh, binding for their Fable, so they can't cycle the cards from their hand. And 2 turn clock with my Nishoba's Brawler with Stubborn Denial backup in hand. So they play the iteration. I let it resolve to counter something more important, and I countered the ending and had lethal next turn. That was it. Okay, so was that game 1 or 2? I'm not sure. Was that game 3? Yeah, that I think it was. Yeah, I think we are done with this. I'll just sorry, I'll just have to check it. Yeah, that was it. Okay, so this was the last game from this league. There was one defeat in the match 2. We will go over that a bit later. So in the last game, I finished this league 4-1. It was a pretty fun league, and you will see that in the matchup I lost. My opponent had like impossibly good hand with playing Hammer Time. Okay, so my opponent had played some Boros Stoneblade here. I decided I had the 2 sounds in hand, so I definitely wanted to have my uh, my Triumph and Shock paired. And but they played Ragavan turn 1, and that is why I decided to go for Bolt turn 1 into Ragavan turn 2, play Triumph. So turn 3 I can play a creature and hold Stubborn Denial. So my opponent went for Caldra, but I really don't care much for Caldra. It's a too slow card against our deck. They can't definitely erase us, so they can just. It's much better for them to stay in the block, but they decide to go attack with. They decided to go for the attack with Caldra, which is definitely not what they want, but whatever they exile our sound to trade with Ragavan because Ragavan had the first strike, and I countered the sword, and I was left with the binding and Draco in hand. They stayed back to this time, but I was able to attack last turn, find the binding with Kavu and some better cards, and now my opponent was on the 5 life, and I cycled 2 cards into I don't need into 2 great cards I need, so my opponent was done. That was it for him. So you will notice that we played a number of matchups where my opponent are playing Blood Moon and they're just not succeeding on winning with Blood Moon, because if you're prioritizing your basic and the mana base, the fetches you play enable very good playing everything you need. So at this position, I was forced to, with this hand, I was kind of forced to go shock turn 2, play my Scion. So I'm risking them having the Blood Moon, but I had a feeling they don't have it because they went for Sacred Foundry turn 2. So in turn 3, I'm going with my basic planes and with Giganta on the in the companion zone, and with my hand of 3 bolts, sorry, tribal flames. Like I have definitely have a game if they do play the Blood Moon. So I drew into more lightning bolts, and but I only had a single red source at this point, so I wasn't able to play more than 1 burn spell for the turn. Okay, so unfortunately, I didn't have the creature to which I could use my Dromoka on. But I was at pretty decent position with so much burn in hand and the Giganta in hand, and now even the Brawler on the field, which is good against the pro-red guys. So I decided to go for the Dromoka because I didn't really need it at this point. I just wanted to kill their burnt tenders. And so I went for Cow. Cow is, even if they block it, it's good because it allows me to cycle cards from my hand. And they were pretty close to dead with the burn in my hand. They used the burn turn to counter the second tribal flames. Okay, so I was again in a pretty good position. They had to use Burrington again for the second lightning bolt, which meant they had to jump the cow, and they can't block with the pro red guy. And I was able to again cycle the cards I don't need for cards that I need. Especially the 4/4 flyer is very good right now, giving my other creature trample, making them impossible for my opponent to survive. They did find a way. I kill my Scion. I will jump to that cow again, and then find the Pyromancer to survive another turn, discarding the Blood Moon, which wasn't good enough at this point for them. And that's it. So at this point, it was definitely over. I had the Stubborn Denial in hand, another threat on the field, and that was it. My opponent conceded. I think they tried to do something more, survive one more turn. Yes, Sokkenzan blocked all my guys, but it didn't matter. Game was over next turn, so we are now. Okay, so that was the first league. We can also watch the defeat against Hammer Time. Game one was interesting because I think they played the hammer turn two, and I just blocked them champ them for a lot of turns. I decided to go for the Stoneforge, just jump with the Stoneforge next turn, and then try to hit something again with Dragawan. Uh, I was able to play two of my creatures in the same turn, like Cow and Brawler, to jump with one and attack with another one next turn, but my opponent had a sword, which meant that I can only jump with Brawler and not Cow or multiple Ragawans from my hand. I was able to destroy the Sigard Aid in case they... But maybe I should just went for fight and counter. It would, I think that would maybe win me the game. I had another Nishoba in hand to block the Mem Knight again. So my opponent went for Paladin. I killed the Paladin response. I was very close to having lethal or finding something to survive another turn, but unfortunately my opponent survived on 3 life, and that was game 1. If they didn't draw into the Paladin or something, I probably would have won that match too. Okay, so unfortunately, game 2, I was forced again to mulligan on 5 cards. Drew into Hidetsugu, which is the greatest card against Hammer Time deck. Definitely one of the best cards, and my opponent also pet my cow, so they ramped me into Hidetsugu, but unfortunately this time my opponent, it was one of the few times that your opponent, your Hammer Time opponent is having a hand which is good against Hidetsugu. I forced my opponent to jump with Ornithopter, counter the skill, and I unfortunately I had to take... I had Bolt going on, so my opponent tried to go Paladin Hammer, but I destroyed the Paladin. But I think I made a misplay again at this point, so I should have gone for Giganta right now. If I went for Giganta at this moment, it would be possible for me to race it, but instead I decided to try my luck, try to hit something from my opponent's turn, which could potentially block me the equipped Stoneforge with Sword of Fire Ice. It didn't definitely worked out for me, and since I didn't play the Giganta last turn, I was in a problem. Definitely in a problem. They had the clock, and if I played my Giganta last turn, I would be able to attack with both Giganta and Hammer Time this turn, starting to make some pressure on my opponent's life total. They also had the perfect hand for next turn, just Sigarda into another into Memnite, into equip sword at the same turn. So the sword beat me both games. It's definitely a nice inclusion against us. So I tried to kill the Memnite, Hammer Time, and tried to go, but I didn't have the out at this point because they had the Inkmoth Nexus to block my Ragavan, and that was it. So that was the loss from the first league. We will now go to the second league. Second league was also great. I played against two Murktide matchups. I had to mulligan the first hand. First two games were both Murktide, I think. Murktide matchups are always very interesting with when playing the zoo. Uh, it was the worst possible position for me. I had a handful of the two drops against their turn one Ragavan, which is like the worst thing that can happen to you playing Zoo against a Murktide deck, and it's mostly how you lose the matchup. You're just unable to double spell with all these two drops in hand, and with Dragon in hand, they are able to use their mana efficiently early to gain that delirium, and when they gain the delirium this fast, it's easy for them to connect again with Dragon, just kill our 2 mana guys with 1 mana and dig with Channeler for next burn spell. And there's really not much I can do uh, at this position. I did find the 1 mana removal spell to destroy one of their creatures, play the Scion as the blocker for the Channeler next turn, but the chances of them not having removal with so much card filtering, it was not possible to survive it, but I succeeded to win the next two games. It's much easier, and I mean it's much harder for them when they're on the play and don't have turn one Ragavan, and I'm able to start with turn two Sino Draco, which is very hard for them to deal with. And I have Dromoka's command back up in hand, which means even when they get the delirium, I'll be able to counter the heat and make a sound even scarier for them. So at this point, I just decide to hold the Dromoka. I definitely expecting them to try to go heat the Scion. So I decided against my opponent went for the heat as I thought they will, and I found my basic, and I had a white fetch in hand to fight another basic next turn. I tried to go Dromoka, but unfortunately my opponent had a spell pierce. Dromoka would be spectacular here. I was trying to counter the heat and fight the Scion with the Ledger Shredder. Okay, so I was still fine because I was able to kill the Ledger Shredder, put the Giganta into hand, also close to casting the Giganta next turn, and my opponent is on 8 life with just 2 cards in their hand, but also uh, now just 1 card and Dragon Ray Channel, which is forced to attack, making it easier for me to dash the Ragavan. So definitely go for it. My opponent has the removal, so at this point I'm just forced to remove the channeler. But they go bold face and try to dig some more cards from the top before while DRC is still alive. Okay, so I was just able to find Tribal Flames. Didn't want to play it last turn because to play around Spell Pierce. So I just played this turn. I didn't have another resource to try to pull them this turn. I had to wait another turn, and it was perfect because I drew into Stubborn Denial to protect the bolt from the counterspell. Okay, that was it. Game 2. Game 3. Game 3, it's now much easier when I know what actually my matchup is. But once again, I'm mulliganing to 5 cards, but as you can see, mulliganing to 5 cards is pretty good with this deck. You have the very strong turn 2 play and very strong turn 3 play against opponent who is really struggling to deal with these threats. So I decide to fetch differently. This time to just make my planes best possible play on turn 3 for me, and it enabled me to go rest in peace. So forcing, they were forced to deal with the fairy, use the spell on the fairy, which meant my turn 4 was very good. I was able to play rest in peace and Scion. So I was really thinking about should I just go for the second Treble Flames, the kill, because it was game 3, and I know they played Spell Pierce, and I just decided to not play around at this time, try to kill them immediately, but definitely better play would be forcing them to deal with the Scion and try to use the Tribal Flames next turn. But still, I was okay. My opponent was at 5 life. I had the binding in hand. They were forced to hold mana to counter my stuff. My opponent succeeded to kill Rest in Peace. Put the counter plus one counter on their other one, and I decided to, against playing the Tribal Flames, I just played the Scion that turn and played Flames next turn. I was trying to find some other threats that make my opponent tap out, so to make my Tribal Flames um, more possible to finish them, and it worked definitely. So Tribal Flames once again finishing that game. Okay, so my next opponent. I had a decent hand one, but I decided I can do better and mulliganed into pretty good 6 cards with Territorial Cowl, Sign of Draco, 2 very good threats, and it turned out to be another Murktide opponent. They don't play the dress down in the main, so Cowl is a very good turn to play on the draw against them. And what is happening here? Why did it stop? Okay. I drew into Leyline Binding. I don't know why there's some problem definitely here. Something is happening. I decided to, at this position, my cards in hand are good. I just want to mess with their Delirium. So I just remove the land from their graveyard. Attack with Kawo, who now has first strike and trample. And my opponent is already on 14. So they go, I just attack with the Channeler, which I don't care about. And they play another Channeler, hold once again the 2 mana. But at this point they have 0 cards in the graveyard. And I have the 2 Dromokas in hand. Why is this happening? I don't know. but the video is blocking, and I'm definitely at an unlosable position right now, just attacking with Cow and the Scion to basically blow out cards in my hand in case they succeed to find the Unholy Heat. And they went for Consider first. I tried to find the Rhythm with Heat, but didn't even find it, so Dromoka wasn't even important. But that was game one. Game two, on the draw, it is much more difficult to play on the draw if your opponent starts with Ragavan and you can't answer it. But if you can answer it and they don't start with Ragavan, then you're good, definitely. So you just need to find your basic at this point, and you're at a decent position. So I think the basic and Ragavan dash is very good play on the draw against Murktide opponent, and after you do this turn 3, you're able to just decide if you want to go for tap drum, try to play the Scion. It depends definitely if they play something or not. Why is this happening? I'm not sure. But they didn't play anything, just holding the permission, so I decided to go for Dash Ragavan, which they countered, so I just save my foothills in case they play the Blood Moon. I can fetch the basic forest. But also, if they don't do it, I can then fetch for my Triumph if needed to play the Sign of Jacob next turn, because I'm also holding the Leyland Binding, and I have it as an answer to Blood Moon if they play it. So they did not play it, which is why I decided to just go for the Triumph, definitely, and I'm not sure why this happening. It shouldn't be this slow. Sometimes this happens for unknown reasons, and video just slows down very much. Okay, so I drew into Stubborn Denial, which was pretty decent draw here. Unfortunately, didn't have a creature on the field to make it even better. So I had to let my opponent resolve the iteration. But they didn't play any threats too, so we were both very light on threats. But it was pretty decent for me. I had multiple removal spells, all cards in my hand, very nice. Really, so my opponent just had a bunch of lands which they discarded with Pyromancer. Uh, and I drew into third Leyland Binding, still no fifth land and no threats to play. So I just hold my bindings, Dromoka, and just pass the turn. My opponent finally did find the moon, tried to play it, also holded the counterspell, but I had 3 Leyland Bindings at this, so they countered the first one. I just played the second one, and it was very important for me to deal with binding, and now I was to deal with moon, and now I was able to play the normal game. Finally found the threat. Um, I was lower on threats. It was for that reason I was struggling probably to find a threat, because I boarded out some. I was trying some new plan against the Murktide. I boarded out all 4 of my Nishovas, or 3 of them maybe, and 1 cow out for some Teferis, rest in pieces. But it worked out pretty good for me in both of these games. I was in this game I was struggling a bit with the green mana. Just had 1 green mana, so I wasn't able to play a Kavu and Nakato in the same turn. I didn't want to get hit by Ragavan, my opponent drawing into something really good from my deck, so I just went for binding on Ragavan. And I had Nakatel for next turn, save Dromoka, I saved Denial. I also drew something's happening because the video is moving much slower than it should be. My opponent unfortunately had a subtlety for my territorial cow. I decided to put a cow on the bottom. I didn't want to draw into another cow. I just wanted to find maybe a land, something like that. Subtlety was pretty good for them here. They were able to attack in the air. And I finally found the second green source. I decided to go for the Giganta first to start attacking them for 5 and also to get this denial online. I take another 3, but now I am in a pretty decent position. I have a Dromoka to kill the subtlety, but still holding it, trying to do some more stuff with it. I first start my turn by going Rest in Peace, and my opponent responds by exiling Pyromancer. I was on a low life, and the Dromoka worked out pretty crazy once again. So I was able to counter the heat and kill the subtlety by fighting Giganta and subtlety. And I decided to go for Nekatel to block the elemental token, but my opponent top decked Bolt for Nekatel, which meant that they bring me to 4 life. And the race is really tight right now. We're both very low on life. There was no point in playing this fetch. I was definitely not going to fetch here. You can see that the game is slow again, but my opponent also didn't have much, and Stubborn Denial and the Giganta bring me this game against Murktide. I think Giganta is a very important card in a Murktide matchup. If you don't play Giganta in your sideboard, I can expect for Murktide matchup to be slightly worse than in the version that plays Giganta. In many times where it was most useful, it was definitely in the Murktide matchup and in the Scum matchup. Those two are definitely two matchups where I see Giganta as the most useful, because those games, especially when you're on the draw, last really long, and the chances of you using the Giganta is very high. So at this point, I see my opponent is playing the Bolt. I think. Okay, so this was the creativity matchup. I always say that the creativity is definitely one of the easiest matchup for Zoo. They just can't deal with the number of creatures and the removal. We play like one bolt is enough. We are turn 4 and turn 5 deck, and even with their fire icing, uh, we're still definitely winning this on the turn 5, which means, in most cases, which means that one bolt is enough to stop the creativity on the turn 2. Even when they're playing first on the draw, they kind of need to have crazy good hands, and I need to have crazy bad hands for them to be able um, to beat us. So this definitely classifies as a weaker hand because I have the tomb. I don't have. If this was a garden, I would be able to play the Nakato turn 1. and I can't play Nakatal turn 1 into the Vren because it will be 1-1, and I also can't play the Ragavan because of the same reason, because the Ragavan ping is just devastating. The Vren ping on the 1-1 Nakatal, sorry. I just waited to find my 2-mana threat, which has 4 power to be able to hold the Stubborn Denial. In this case, I know that game is going to last longer, so I'm prepared for a longer game against my opponent. My opponent besieges the ley line on my targeting of the token, so nothing really happens. I still had Stubborn Denial in hand, Nishoba on the field. I decided I can try to go for the win next turn. I just needed to try to dash the Ragavan. If they don't have anything, they would trade probably Dwarf with Ragavan. They would take 5 damage, and I would try to finish them with Triple Flames. I just needed Bolt at this point to win this game, but I wasn't able to find a Bolt. I found just another. I knew they returned, unfortunately, the procedure to their hand, so I wasn't able to save my Shoba here. Yeah, so the procedure was very important for them in this matchup. I was still holding the flames in hand, so every bolt or flames top deck is winning me the game at this point, but unfortunately that didn't happen, so I was forced to go to game 3, but you see that they really need us to draw bad, and they had to draw good to be able to fight this matchup. So I decided to just go like breeding pool uh, to like pretend we have the Stubborn Denial in hand, but they had the Bolt Ping Ran, so I was pretty confident on winning the game 3, because I think I actually still didn't lose this matchup ever, so I was pretty confident of winning it on the game 3, and game 3 turned out to be a pretty easy game for me. I just went turn 1 Ragavan. I definitely knew my opponent is going to play the Ren and try to ping the Ragavan. I didn't want to waste the Stubborn Denial on Ren. I had the Dromoka in hand to save the Ragavan from the ramping, which makes my Ragavan a 3-2. Much better threat, so I just do that. And drew into another Flusterstorm, which is just an overkill at this point, so I just went Giganta to hand. It wasn't really needed, but it was fine. Just I was able to counter the Teferi and still hold the Flusterstorm for the next turn. Against Flusterstorm, they definitely can't play the creativity, so that was it. That was game 3. Game 4. This was the last league, which ended up as 5-0. So, 2 leagues I played, just one loss. That loss against the Hammer Time, where my opponent beat me twice with Sword of Fire Ice card that Hammer Time usually doesn't play. but it served them very well this time. Okay, so this was blue-white control. You can see this deck slightly more often lately on the MTGO, probably because people are currently unsure on what deck to choose. What the control players are confused on what deck to currently choose and play, so they're coming back to the blue-white control. So I decided just to go for the Nakato next turn. I didn't want to play into my Scion, so it could possibly die to the mass removal. So I just decided to tap out to go for the Giganta. They went ending the ferry, which was fine for me. They obviously didn't have mass removal at this point, so I decided just to bolt at the ferry because it enables my stubborn denial, which then I used on their big Teferi to win the game and have their concede. Okay, so uh, game 2, keeping hand with just one threat, but two stubborn denials, tribal flames, I think it's decent. My opponent went for a Chalice turn 1, which was perfect for my stubborn denial. I had Temple Garden in hand. I decided to just go Steam Vents. It wasn't really that important. I also drew into another threat, Territorial Cowl, which enables some filtering from my hand if needed. They went for Spreading Seas again, but I had 3 lands in my hand, and because of Spreading Seas, at this point I decide against against filtering cards from my hand. I just wanted to have both of these lands in my deck in case they play the second Spreading Seas, and I wanted to play the Nishoba Brawlers this turn and hold blue mana for denial. That is why I decided to go for Breeding Pool and attack just for 3 damage. I let the second Spreading Seas also resolve, and I decided to counter their removal spell on the Brawler. So I just went for Triumph attack, making my guys 4 power and looting the Wheel of Summer away. Unfortunately, into another because I didn't have green mana open for this turn. They were able to kill the cow, but I just attacked them with the Shoba and finished them off with flames. This was very easy game for me, and this deck usually is for Zoo. If you just play smart, don't play too much creatures, because the one way they can win is by playing the mass removal on turn 4, sorry, and then playing the big Teferi on turn 5, and tapping 2 lands and using counterspell and solitude to destroy your pressure. Okay, so again playing on the hammer time, this time for in the trophy match, and I did a mistake here. Definitely, you will just see it next turn. I decided to go for the Cabo to make my stubborn denial online, but imagine just at this point if I just held, I was thinking about holding the Dromoka, but instead I decided to go for the Cabo to make stubborn denial online for the next turn, and I was thinking if they go the hammer, I still can go attack with cow, then jump, and like I did last time against when I played against Hammer. Luckily, this opponent didn't have the sword of the fire and ice against us, so I was still able to. But imagine if I just holded my mana for this Dromoka command, my opponent would play the hammer. I would destroy the Sigarda's aid and destroy one of their creatures I choose, like Esper Sentinel or something like that. It would be perfect blowout. Maybe my opponent would play it differently, but Dromoka would just be amazing, and it would prevent them from equipping the hammer next turn, because they would be forced to sack the Sigarda's aid, and they would lose their creature. Okay, I still was in the decent position. I decided to I needed to kill the Giver of Thrones, so I was forced to make them draw a card with Dromoka, and I put them on 9 life. Uh, and for some reason I was still in decent position because I was able to hold the bind. I had the binding. I had the tribal flames. My opponent I had the pierce. Unfortunately for the flames, because I had to play the Savage Giant tapped to make my cow 5/5 and flames deal 5 damage, and they kind of had the perfect hand for what I had. They all drew all these cards because of the Esper Sentinel, so they had really good Sentinel draws. I did exile it, but they found just pure steel paladin and another hammer. Basically everything they needed to win this game. So that was, I would say, an unfortunate loss, game one. But I was still decent, as you can see in my previous league. I had 3 wins in a row against Hammer Time, and I know definitely how to win this matchup, how to uh, play good against this. So they do the hammer equip turn 2. I don't really care about that with this hand. I just let them draw the card with Sentinel, exile the Sentinel, and start attacking with Scion while holding. I definitely can lose the game here if I pay mana for their Sentinel and tap out, so they use the Blacksmith skill and then kill me because of that. So I definitely let them draw another card, hold my Stubborn Denial, counter their skill, and they were just now left with no permanence on the field, just a Nexus, just a Memnite, which wasn't enough for them to get back into this game, especially with the Bolt and the Dromoka in hand. They tried to go for the kill, equip Shadow Spear on Memnite, but I have 2 removals, and I have the Bolt to finish the game next turn. And that was it. So uh, it was time for game 3. It's definitely trickier on the play, but I had like really kind of hand I want to have against Hammer. I have the good, very good turn 2 threat or blocker if needed in the air. I have I can hold the bolt for their Sigarda's 8 Hammer equip. They don't even play the creature, they just play one land, jump. Didn't have the second land at this point for the first turn, they find it next turn. But and they were holding the hammer in hand. They find it with gift, and so I definitely wanted to play my Hiritsugu this turn to destroy the 8 before they can equip the Inkmoth Nexus, or just try to equip it. Um I decided to go with Dromoka in their upkeep, and you can once again see uh, that Dromoka does really a great deal of very good stuff, like making your opponent sacrificing Urza Saga, sacrificing Fable, sacrificing Leyland Binding. All of these cards are played uh, really a lot lately, so uh, putting counter on the Scion, countering the heat, destroying both Fable and the token. These moves are all great and win a lot of the games. Okay, that was the win on the game 3, and that was uh, the last game. We can watch one more game I played in between those two. Um, I think this was the zoo mirror. Okay, my opponent played first. They started with Nekatl. I started with the Ragavan. Let's see which one is scarier. Definitely when I was able to luckily kill their cow and attack with Ragavan. I didn't find anything of their top, but still it was good. So at this point, when I don't have removal, with against these Nekatals, Ragavan becomes much worse. But I was able to make my Kabu and Brawler fire-powered. Um, I decided to go with both of my guys because I had they were forced to attack, and I found another Kabu. But they unfortunately had remand, so I had to shock in to play it in Shovel Brawler. And they just went for cow loot. It was obvious at this point they have denial, which is not doing much, so they wanted just to attack with cow to loot the denial away, draw into something more useful. And it made my position much better. I even exiled the Scion from off of their top, and Dromoka command wins the game once again by countering the Tribal Flames, putting the counter on the sign of Draco. And so you can just see how many uses the Dromoka really has, and it was like really great card to have in all of these matchups we played today. So you can see my opponent played Stomping Ground, and I really don't want people to play the Stomping Ground. You can see that um, it only thing it is the worst shock to have on the turn in your starting hand. It's the worst second land to have because it's impossible to get colors you need, especially if you have just access to two shocks. I decided to attack the Teferi, kill the Teferi to make my denial better, and uh, I think Cow is very important in this matchup. Just who starts attacking with Cow will definitely win this. They tried to go for Dromoka, but I had a denial, and that was it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you as many games as possible. I think we just saw a bunch of games. I hope it wasn't too much exhausting for some of you guys watching this. And of course, you weren't forced to watch everything, but the parts you and games you like more. So that is it. I explained some of the deck choices and sideboard choices at the beginning of the video. I hope you enjoyed the games, and remember to subscribe to see more content, zoo content in the future, but also um, some other brews and different kind of content. So that's it for this time. Goodbye. Yeah, we are closing this and this.